Hello everyone. In this tutorial I'm going to model this floral sunglass and I'm going to use the Array Modifier in a circular path to get all these flowers around the frame. So to start I'm going to add a circle with 48 vertices. So 48 gives us that nice round edge, and select all vertices, press E to extrude, then S to scale inward. That gives the thickness of the frame ring. Now select everything again, extrude over the x-axis. That gives the frame its depth, so it's not just too flat. Now I want to bevel the outer edges, and I need the second lens and the bridge connecting them. So move the 3D cursor over the center point. That's going to be our symmetrical axis. Then add a mirror modifier on the y-axis in my case. Now add an empty, and this is going to be the mirror object, and make sure clipping is checked, otherwise the two sides will just overlap instead of merging. Now delete the interfaces where these two edges connect. The empty here is basically giving the mirror an external reference point, so it's mirror around the empty instead of mirroring around the object itself. You will notice the bridge is going to be completely straight, and that's not quite right. So I will pull these vertices slightly forward and curve them a little down. Now I want to create the lens, so I will separate this loop and add a grid fill. That's Ctrl F and then grid fill. Move it slightly forward so it has a little curve instead of being completely flat. And this little curve is what makes it look like an actual lens and not just a flat circle. Now add a loop cut here and scale these faces over the y-axis. Press S, Y, 0. Alright, now I'm going to select the outer face of the frame where the arm connects. So duplicate it with Shift D and extrude it over the x-axis. Now the length of the arm should be roughly as long as the full width of the glasses. So if you can notice it, it's 4 squares wide approximately. And now I will bevel the edge of the arm, and I will add loop cuts along the length. So now here I will scale these loop cuts slightly using individual origins. So different scales instead of being the same width all the way through. And I will press G a little down, and I will rotate this slightly. Okay, now this is the detail that most people skip, and I don't want to do that, so I want to create the hinge. So I will add a plane, scale it down, and position it between the arm and the frame. Add some loop cuts, then bevel the vertex and change the profile to get a circle hole shape, and this becomes the screw hole in the hinge. Now use the knife tool to connect the vertices so you have quads, and delete the center face to open up the hole, and extrude to give it some thickness, and duplicate it 3 times. And I want to use the middle one to connect the arm to the frame, so extrude this face and add bevel. Now press Ctrl L and copy modifiers so it has a subdivision surface and a mirror. Now the important part is that this hinge piece needs to be separated from the frame because in reality it moves. I will not go into the animation part here, but I want to set it up correctly. So delete the faces that connected to the frame and then set the origin to the center of the screw hole and set origin to 3D cursor. Now if you rotate it, it pivots correctly around the screw. And I will do the same for the arm. Set the 3D cursor to the hinge edge and set the origin there. Select origin to 3D cursor. And now you can rotate the arm without overlapping the frame. Alright, you can test the rotation, adjust the geometry, and keep testing until the movement is clean. Last thing on the hinge, I want to add a little screw detail. So duplicate this edge, scale it down slightly, extrude it along the z-axis to give it height. These are a small detail in case of the close-up shots. Okay, here's the fun part, the flowers. So first I need to build one single flower. So I will set the 3D cursor to the top of the frame and add a circle there. Rotate it and scale it down. Now here's the trick. Delete almost all the vertices and keep only 4 of them. Extrude vertices to create the basic petal shape and add loop cuts and adjust them until you get the shape of the petal. Add subdivision surface. I will tweak the shape a little more until it looks good. Now here's where the magic happens. Add Array Modifier to the petal. You will see by default it's just duplicates in a straight lines, and that's not what we want. So turn off relative offset and check object offset instead. And this is the key. Object offset works as moving each copy according to the transformation of another object. So I need to give it an object to follow, and here I will use an empty. So plug it into the object field in the Array Modifier and set your count to 8. Now if you rotate the empty on the x-axis, in my case, I will rotate it 45 degrees, and just like that you have a full flower. Now I will go back and add some depth. So insert the faces and scale it. Now apply the Array Modifier and select these vertices because I want to merge them. So press M and merge by distance. Now press F to fill the center I for inset, and use the grid fill to get a clean topology for the center. And now we do the same trick again, but for the whole flower going around the entire frame. This is the second array in this tutorial, and it's the same concept, object offset with an empty. Add a new array modifier, check object offset. So this empty needs to be at the exact center of the frame, because the flower is going to rotate around this point. So set flower's origin to the 3D cursor, set origin to 3D cursor. I will set the count to 15. Now rotate the empty on the x-axis. And now if you want to scale the flower, you can set the origin to the flower and scale it a little, then set the origin again to the center of the frame. Or you can scale it in the edit mode, so you don't need to change the origin. Alright, now I want to mirror the flower array to the other lens, so select the flower object and add a mirror modifier, and make sure it's referencing the same empty that we use for the frame mirror. So now both lenses have their flowers. And now before we move on to materials, I want to group everything together so the glasses move as one piece. So add a new empty. This one is just going to be the parent object. Select all parts and make sure that the empty is the active object. Then press Ctrl P and choose Set Parent Object, Keep, Transform. Now if you move or scale the empty, everything moves with it. And one important thing before you apply any modifiers, save a backup version of your files or duplicate all your objects and hide them in a separate collection. And the reason is that once you apply the modifier, it's permanent. If you need to go back and adjust the flower count or any other value, you want that non-destructive version to exist somewhere. Now you will notice that the model is around 4 meters in scale, which is obviously way too big for a pair of glasses. So scale everything down through the empty so it reaches a realistic size around 12 centimeters. And you will notice how differently the lighting reads once the scale is correct. Alright, now I already set up the lighting and I'm not covering it here because honestly it's a whole topic. Maybe I will do a separate tutorial for that. Okay, so now let's add the materials. And we have 4 things to set up: the flower center, the frame, and the lenses. So the basic color of the flower white or just slightly warm white, and change the roughness to 0.4. I don't want it to be shiny. And now the important part here is the subsurface. Set the weight to 0.085. This is what gives them that soft natural look instead of that plastic feel. So subsurface scattering basically lets light go slightly into the surface before bouncing back out. And that's what makes the skin look soft instead of fake. Set the scale to 0.05. And that's it for this one. Now for the center part, select it in the edit mode. And add a new slot, then add the material. The color is a warm orange, something like this, not too bright. The roughness is slightly shinier than the petals, which gives a nice contrast. Same subsurface setting. We want them consistent so they catch light the same way. Okay, so now the frame, and this one looks simple, but it's actually the most important material to get right, because if it doesn't look transparent, it just looks like white plastic. I will lower the roughness. I want it to be smooth. Now the transmission, set the weight to 1. That's the one that actually makes it transparent, and without this, it's just shiny white. And make sure you are on cycles, not EV. Transmission doesn't work properly in EV render, so you'll just get a weird result. So now for the lenses, I'm not using principled shader. I'm going to mix 3 shaders together, and I will explain why as we go. So first, I will add a refraction shader. And set the color with 0 roughness. Now add a glossy BSDF, roughness 0.5. This handles the reflections you see on the lens surface, and connect them with a mix shader with a factor of 0.035. Now I will add a transparent shader to handle the transparency and connect it with another mix shader. Now I don't want to use a fixed value for the second mix shader, so instead I will add a light path node. Plug the is camera array output into the factor, and this what makes the lens slightly more transparent when viewed directly by the camera, which prevent that dark black look you sometimes get with glass material in cycles.